Welcome everybody. Hope you're ready for an exciting video on VLANs today. As always, the resources for this course can be found at the link in the description below, so you can have all this for your notes as well as the lab that follows below. So VLANs, they're similar to subnets and how subnets divide larger networks, but VLANs can divide your subnets or your local networks into different logical networks to reduce the number of physical switchers that you would need to physically connect to routers to divide them. By default, VLANs can't communicate with other VLANs connected to the same switch, and you would need a router to communicate between VLANs because logically they're different networks. And VLANs are often used as a form of separation of duties or departments within a company, and they add a small level of security to your LAN. So some new commands that we'll be going over. Let me hop into our switch right here, into our command line interface. We're going to go ahead, first command after we get into global configuration mode is going to be VLAN followed by a number. So we'll go ahead and we'll call this VLAN 20. Enter. Now we've moved into VLAN configuration mode for this VLAN that we just created. Then we can enter our next command, which is name followed by the name that we want this VLAN to have. So we could say name marketing. Enter. Perfect. Up next, because VLANs after they're created, they're not active yet, we need to go into that VLAN in order to bring the interface up. So if we go ahead, we can either exit out of this mode and go into the interface for the VLAN, or we can go straight there from here by doing interface VLAN 20. As you see, as soon as we entered into that, it changed its state to up. Our next command that we'll be going over would be switch port mode access or trunk. So this is going to set your switch port to act as either an access port or a trunk port. So access ports are usually connected to end devices, and trunk ports are usually connected between switches or between routers, and they allow multiple VLANs to pass across them, whereas access ports generally only have one VLAN. So if we go ahead and we exit out of here, if we go into one of our ports, let's say interface F01, we can go switch port mode access. That changes that port to an access port. Then if we wanted, we could go into F0/2, we could say switch port mode trunk. That port would be designated as a trunk port. Next command would be switch port access VLAN, and then the VLAN that we want that port to be able to access. So if we hop back into our interface F0/1 that we made an access port, we could say switch port access VLAN 20. And now VLAN 20 would be allowed across that port. We can verify this quickly by doing a do show VLAN brief. And right here we see our VLAN 20 that we've created called marketing, and F01 is in that VLAN. Next command we've got is switch port trunk allowed VLANs, and then a comma separated list of numbers. This is going to tell your trunk port which VLANs to allow to cross it. So if we go ahead and we go into our interface F02, which we made a trunk port, we can go switch port trunk allowed VLAN, we could say 20. Another command we can enter is switch port trunk native VLAN, and then the VLAN that we want to have. That'll specify one VLAN to be sent with untagged traffic across the link. It's best practice usually to set this to some VLAN that's not in use / a black hole for security reasons. But if we were to implement this command, we'd say switch port trunk native VLAN. We'll just give it a random number, something we won't be using. And a command that we already saw, show VLAN brief. This is going to display all the VLANs that are configured on the device and which ports are in them. Another command that we can run to see that the status of our trunk ports would be show interfaces trunk. It'll display all the trunks that are configured on our device and which VLANs are allowed to cross them. In order for this command to display anything, you do need to have something connected to that trunk port. So If we go ahead and run show int trunk, you can see our port F02 is a trunk port. It's trunking. Native VLAN that we set is 1000, and the VLANs that we said are allowed on it are VLANs 20. So that's a brief rundown of the different commands that you'll need to be able to configure VLANs on your switches. I hope you'll stick around for the next video where we'll get into a lab section and we'll actually implement this. We'll divide one network into 2 separate VLANs, and we'll see how they can only talk to the devices that are on the same VLAN. So I'll see you in the next video.